Will you pray for me? Lord, may the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, because you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. When he was 8 years old, Erica Torres's husband's parents brought him to the United States from Mexico. They came without a visa, without permission. They came illegally. And they raised him here. That was 24 years ago that they came, and in the time that has elapsed since, Erica Torres met and fell in love with her husband, and they got married, and they've started a business, and he is still an undocumented alien. Now, Erica, she's legal. She has papers, she was born here, she's a full citizen, and usually if a foreigner marries a citizen, it's easy to get a green card, a permanent residency card. But here's the catch for Erica Torres's husband, who does not say his name publicly. If he returns to Mexico to go to the American consulate there to apply for his green card, which is what you have to do. You have to apply in your home country to the American consulate there. If he returns home to apply for that card, he will be trapped in a catch-22. There was a law passed here in 1996 that says that anyone who has resided illegally in the United States and returns to their home country is barred from re-entry into the country for at least 3 years, often for as long as 10 years. So if Erica's husband leaves, he's faced with the prospect of up to 10 years trapped in his home country, separated from his wife. Perhaps I should say trapped in his parents' home country. He has lived here since he was 8, after all. He faces the prospect of a 10-year separation from his wife with no guarantee of a green card at the end. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he chooses to stay here with her. You see, he pictures what his life would be like in Mexico, first of all, where they would see him as an American and perhaps as a target for kidnapping in the city where his parents grew up. But also, the real problem is this: he imagines standing in lines for 10 years. He imagines going to office after office with a fistful of papers and standing in line and inching forward and inching forward and inching forward till he gets to the window or the desk and whoever it is that sits behind it, and he imagines being told no over and over again. Have you ever stood in line? I'm not talking about the line for Splash Mountain. I'm not talking about the line at the grocery store when you know there's money in your pocket to pay for what's in your cart. I mean the DMV. Or the VA. Have you ever stood in line for food stamps or for unemployment benefits? Have you ever gone to the Social Security Administration? I want you to know that there are people in this world who spend most of their days waiting in lines like those. And even those of us who don't have to spend most of our days there, if we live in a place that's run to some degree by a bureaucracy, will one day find ourselves in a line, slowly inching forward and forward and forward till we see a lady behind 2 inches of plexiglass who's had a bad day. Or if she hasn't had a bad day, she's had a hard life. She sees hard case after hard case after hard case, and she's not paid as well as maybe she ought to be. And she has all the power. You have your handful of papers and you have your hope, but what she says is going to matter. Which stamp she pulls off the rack and hits your paper with is going to matter. Whether she thinks you have enough proof or enough evidence or the right numbers or enough money is going to matter. Terry and I went to the Social Security Administration to get Asa's, our son's, Social Security number not long ago, and we're lucky. We speak perfect English. We have a computer at home and we know how to use it. We have money in our checking account, and we had all kinds of documents. We had a folder about this thick of documents, and we knew we had it all right. And so we went, and the lady called us up eventually. And when we got there, Terry slid the folder through the little thing in the window, and he said, "I'd like to apply for a social security number for my son." And the woman said, "Why did you wait so long?" And Terry said, "We didn't know that we had waited so long. We thought we were doing this at the right time." And she said, "Well, it's going to be really hard." And Terry said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, because he's over 12, isn't he? And I see he has a work history here. Has he been paying taxes all this time?" And Terry said, "What? Our son is 2. And only then did she look up and realize that the person sitting next to Terry, that's me, was not the son for whom Terry was applying. When she realized what was happening, she chose not to see the stricken look on Terry's face at what she must have assumed about our ages, incorrectly assumed. When she realized what was going on, it took us about 5 minutes. But she did have to look up at us before it was going to happen. Standing in a bureaucratic line is one of the most dehumanizing experiences out there. When you're reduced to a number or to a file or to how much you can write on your check or how well you can speak English. What if we didn't speak English that day, Terry and I? You could barely understand her speaking through a microphone when we were both speaking English. What if we didn't? Or what if we couldn't hear well? What if we didn't have a computer? You get the idea. Jesus shows up at the Jordan one day, and there's John baptizing everyone in the Jordan. And don't you think they must have formed a line? And don't you think they inched forward and inched forward and inched forward? We don't know what John said to them when they got up there. Did he ask them for a confession of faith or a confession of their sins? Did he ask them what they believed in? Did he ask them to promise something? We don't know. Here's the other thing we don't know. We don't know if he baptized everyone that came forward. This is Plymouth Church. We assume he did. But we don't know, and he was a grumpy guy. And remember when the Sadducees and the Pharisees came to him and he called them a brood of vipers and told them off and sent them packing? What if one of them had been in line? Would he have baptized them? Or would he have said, rejected, next? We don't know. And so I wonder what it was like for Jesus to be in that line, inching forward bit by bit by bit. But he finally got there, and John baptized him, and when Jesus came up out of that water, the sky was rent wide, and down came that dove, and out came that voice, and heaven and earth kissed in that moment. And since the earliest days of the Christian church, theologians have hated this story. They can't stand it. This was a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins, after all. Did Jesus sin? Did he need this? Did the creator of heaven and earth screw up and need to be washed clean? And by the way, doesn't he outrank John? Why is John baptizing him instead of the other way around? And the theologians spin and spin and spin on this question. Here's what Fred Craddock says. Fred Craddock's a preacher, a brilliant one. You should hear him if you get the chance, but hurry, he's getting old. Here's what Fred Craddock says. He says that the most important thing about this story, the thing that answers all the questions that the theologians ask, is this: Jesus gets in line with everybody else. Philippians says that God, in coming in Jesus, emptied God's self out. The fancy term for that, the theological term, is kenosis. God emptied God's self of power and omniscience and all the attributes that God has to be like us. And Fred Craddock says that the way God showed that, the way Luke shows it in his story, is that Jesus stepped in line like the rest of those poor schleps from Jerusalem. And he didn't just get in line. I mean, surely he could have gone to the front. If anybody gets a fast pass, if anyone gets to budge, right, it's Jesus. He could have gone right to the front, but he doesn't. The story says he was last after everyone else had been baptized comes Jesus. He wanted to ride sweep. He wanted to pick up the rear. He wanted to be sure that no one was left behind. And this is when his ministry starts. It says, right, he's 30 years old. That's old in this time and place. He had maybe 10 years to live if he was a normal human being in that time and place. He waits till he's 30. I have to wonder, had he stood in a lot of other lines first, trying to figure out what it was God wanted him to do to start his ministry? Had he tried a bunch of other things? Had he inched forward and forward and forward in a bunch of other lines, and was this the one he was hoping for? Did he say, all right, God, I'll try it one more time. Let me see what this guy John can do. Was he nervous about what was going to happen as he got closer to the water? Was he not sure if John was going to accept him? Did he think that John might slide the window shut right in his face? We don't know. Was he like an immigrant from heaven who wasn't sure whether John was going to let him in? And when he went down into those waters and came back up, and God said, "You are my son, the beloved. In you I am well pleased." Wasn't that God and Jesus knocking aside every bar to entry that there was? When God immigrated from heaven to earth, didn't they knock aside all the bars to us immigrating from earth to heaven? Isn't that what the rent sky means? Doesn't that mean the gates of heaven are thrown wide forevermore after what Jesus did when he got in that line like the rest of us? They're changing the laws. Now it's going to be possible for people like Erica Torres and her husband to apply for a waiver to that waiting period. He will have to go home, but he'll be able to go home with a waiver in hand, so he won't be kicked out for 3 years. This is for people who were brought in, not under their own control, brought in as children. So the Torreses hope that he'll be able to go home and come back to his wife in a matter of weeks. It's a step. Jesus enters the same line we all stand in, the immigrants and the people at the DMV and everybody else. He enters into that line and he transforms every line. Every line of people that somebody is dehumanizing whether they want to or not. Every line that inches slowly forward and finds a grumpy person behind a desk at the front. And when you get to the front now, after what Jesus did, after your baptism, you will never be alone with that lady behind the desk again, because always right behind her will be the sky opening up and that dove coming down and that voice of God saying, no matter what they do, no matter how they stamp your application, no matter whether they tell you you're at the wrong window and you have to go over there, no matter what they